Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because, well, we're basically stepping into a time machine. We're going to look at America through the eyes of a seriously sharp, brilliant, and honestly, pretty peppery outsider. I recently came across this fascinating analysis of a 1905 travelogue by a guy named Sergei Witte. Now, Witte was a long-serving finance minister and actually the first prime minister for Russia's last czar, Nicholas II. When his memoirs were published in America back in 1921, they contained this vivid, sweet, and yet kind of delightfully grudging portrait of the United States. It's just this incredibly rare, unfiltered look at our society right as it was stepping onto the world stage. A mighty locomotive bearing down history's tracks. Think about that imagery for a second. This unspoken realization was really the central thesis of Witte's entire journey. He didn't just see a young, bustling nation. No, he saw the undeniable momentum of the future. See, Witte was a guy who just got things. He possessed this penetrating mind that could cut straight through the noise to the heart of any matter. So, when a mind like that crashes into the dizzying energy of 1905 America, the observations are just, well, they're nothing short of electric.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The reluctant Russian diplomat. A brilliant mind sent to save the Tsar.
So before we get to the wild culture shock, we really need to understand the stakes. Witte was known for his asperity. He was waspish, he was blunt, and he was on a mission of life and death. He was literally trying to save Russia, to save the aristocracy from itself, and to somehow liberalize the country just enough to stave off a revolution without completely tearing the nation apart. If we think about the timeline of events, the pressure was immense. He had totally opposed Russia's aggression in the East, warning it would be a disaster. And, well, he was right. In 1904, the Russo-Japanese War kicked off, and it was a total catastrophe. Witte actually wrote that the entire Russian fleet was buried in the Japanese waters. They lost every major land battle. A revolution was right on the brink of toppling the Tsar. Enter America. President Theodore Roosevelt steps up and offers to host peace talks in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So the desperate Tsar forces a very reluctant Witte to go to America as his chief representative.
Section 2. Culture shock and skyscrapers. Spinning the press and touching the sky.
Right from the moment his ship steamed out of France and hit New York, Witte was thrust into this totally alien world. He arrives to find a prosperous country just exploding with joy, greeted by this massive flotilla of small vessels and motorboats. He was even caught off guard by the American Secret Service agents assigned to him. He noted with genuine shock that these American sleuths actually looked, spoke, and behaved like perfect gentlemen. But what truly struck him right out of the gate was a completely new kind of power. He instantly recognized the tremendous influence of the American press. He saw that they actually shaped public opinion, which for him was a massive revelation. So, mopped by reporters, Witte comes up with this modern PR strategy on the fly. He decides he's going to spend them. He pretends Russia isn't bankrupt or desperate at all, but just, they're out of politeness. To win over the American people, he acts without a shadow of snobbishness, treating everyone, no matter their social position, as an absolute equal. It was a brilliant move, but he admitted it was completely exhausting. Because, well, all acting is exhausting if you're not used to it. Now, the sheer scale of this culture shock really boils down to one wild number, 37. That's the number of floors Witte traveled up in an elevator when he visited one of America's brand new skyscrapers. He literally called the building a monster. Standing all the way up there, he was astounded because he could actually feel the top room swaying in the light breeze. He was physically experiencing the dizzying heights of American ambition.
But touching the sky? Yeah, it came with a pretty hefty price tag. Witte found America to be incredibly expensive. He noted, with just a hint of exasperation, that you couldn't even give an elevator boy a tip of less than a single dollar. I mean, $1 back then? Everything about the American economy just felt massively inflated to this old-world aristocrat.
Okay, but the financial shock was honestly nothing compared to the social shock. He simply could not wrap his head around the fact that most of the waiters in hotels and restaurants were actual university students, and they weren't the least bit ashamed of doing menial duties. He reflected that, back home, Russian youths would literally rather starve than demean themselves by doing servant work. And on top of that, he was absolutely floored to see young women from good families just strolling the streets and parks completely unaccompanied by chaperones. To him, it was a society completely turned upside down.
Section 3, Encounters in the Crowd, Human Moments in Boston.
As Witte and his team traveled the country, the whole trip was soundtracked by this continuous, deafening roar of sirens and factory whistles. It was literally the loud industrial heartbeat of a growing nation. But amidst all that noise, Witt actually found these moments of profound, quiet humanity, particularly in Boston, where local authorities were actually terrified he might be attacked. Instead of hiding, Witt boldly stepped right into the crowds and just started striking up conversations. He met a group of Russian Jewish immigrants, and they spoke together in their native tongue. Now, think about this. These were people who had fled the exact Russian oppression that Witt represented, and they told him how, in America, they enjoyed full liberty, equal rights, a comfortable living. Yet, incredibly, they told him they would always love Russia, they didn't side with Japan, and they actually wished him good fortune, saying, "And we shall pray to God for you." It was just this wonderfully complex human exchange that clearly moved him deeply.
Section 4. Peace in Portsmouth, a treaty and a unifying moment. Of course, all this cultural observation was really just the backdrop to his main mission. On September 5, 1905, the peace treaty was successfully hammered out. And this brilliantly illustrates the overwhelming, unifying joy of the American people in that moment. Portsmouth absolutely exploded in celebration. They fired cannons, the town was covered in flags. Witt was driven to a local church through a crowd so thick he could barely get through. Spectators lined the roads, and a soldier even broke military discipline just to shout a Russian greeting at him. Inside the church, Witt witnessed what he called a wonderful spectacle. There was this solemn procession of Orthodox priests, rabbis, and ministers of various creeds. A choir was singing peace hymns. People were openly weeping. And you know what? Incredibly, the cynical, hard-edged Witt wept right along with them. He wrote that he had never prayed with more fire than at that moment, seeing it as the ultimate dream of all enlightened followers of Christ. Are we not all Christians, he asked himself. He was just so deeply moved by this unified American spirit.
Section 5. J.P. Morgan's famous nose. The aristocrat meets the capitalist. After the intense emotional high of Portsmouth, Witte had one more legendary encounter. And it's just this fascinating, kind of hilarious clash between the old world aristocrat and the new world capitalist. See, Russia's treasury had been totally emptied by the war and the revolution, so Witte desperately needed a massive loan. To get it, he met with the insanely wealthy banker, J.P. Morgan, right aboard his yacht. Initially, Morgan said he would help. Feeling incredibly grateful, Witte then tried to offer what he genuinely thought was a helpful service. He pointed out, very bluntly, that Morgan was afflicted with a disfiguring nose disease, literally calling it a large growth resembling a beet. With the utmost politeness, Witte tells this powerful billionaire about a specific doctor back in Berlin who could surgically remove the growth and fix his nose. I mean, just imagine the awkward silence on that yacht.
But Morgan's response? It is pure American capitalism. Morgan politely refused. He said he actually knew about that doctor, but if he came back to New York with a cured nose, every street boy in the city would point and laugh their heads off. "Everybody knows my nose," Morgan told him. To put it in modern terms, Morgan was basically explaining to this Russian diplomat that his beet-like nose was a core part of his personal brand. No way was he changing it. Witte noted that Morgan was pretty good-natured about the whole thing, but, well, months later, Morgan mysteriously backed out of the Russian loan entirely. Go figure.
Section 6. The American Locomotive, Prophecies and Legacies. So, Witte packs his bags. His pockets are literally stuffed with little trinkets and valuable gifts that Americans had slipped into them. A local custom he found really charming, by the way, and he prepares to return to a crumbling empire. Surprisingly, he never explicitly summed up his final thoughts on America in his memoirs. But reading between the lines, it's abundantly clear he knew he had witnessed something monumental. Let's step back and see how this built into the future. The very next year, President Theodore Roosevelt receives the Nobel Peace Prize. America had officially arrived on the global stage. As for Witte, the brilliant, prophetic diplomat went home and lived just long enough to see the start of World War I in 1914. He had vehemently warned against it, prophesying it would end in total catastrophe for Russia. But, as usual, nobody listened. They just called him an alarmist. Sergei Witte saw the American locomotive coming from miles away. He recognized the incredible power of the press, the dignity of labor, the breakneck speed of industry, and the surprising unity of a really diverse people. Which kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? If a brilliant, blunt, and super observant outsider like Witte were to travel through our society today, looking past all our daily noise on our modern skyscrapers, what mighty locomotive would they see bearing down the tracks toward us right now? Think about that for a bit, and, as always, keep learning.